Okay, welcome everybody again to another In Conversation With. Thank you for registering. I'm really excited about this evening's webinar. So yeah, I've got the normal housekeeping just to go through. So just for any assistive tech users, any screen reader users that are joining this webinar for the first time, don't worry, nobody can see you and nobody can hear you. The webinar format means that it's just me, Martin, and Jenny who'll be on the screen and that you'll be able to hear. We're recording this webinar this evening as well, so that'll be available at the Thomas Pocklington Trust website, which is www.pocklington-trust.org.uk. We'll probably upload that tomorrow, at some point tomorrow, but we'll drop an email to all, to everybody who's attended tonight to let them know that that's up, along with some additional resources as well. We've already received some questions, which we'll try and endeavour to answer this evening. We have set some time aside for a question and answer. There is a question and answer box on your screen, which you can access. And if you type your questions in there, we'll get around to them at the end. We've left about 10-15 minutes. So, and any that we can't answer tonight, we will follow up on and get an answer to you in due course. So without further ado, as some of you will be aware already, if you've joined us for our other webinars, I'm Martin Sigsworth. I'm the Senior Employment Manager with Thomas Pocklington Trust. I'm registered blind with no usable vision. Had quite a varied career up until this point, having worked in HR, media, youth work, and also spent a large chunk working in the charity sector as well. So the aim of tonight will be for me and Jenny to have a conversation about her role, her experiences, and and me to kind of bring a perspective of a blind and partially sighted person as well. I'd like to thank Jenny for joining us tonight. I'm really excited. We have quite a good relationship with Standard Chartered Bank, which dates back definitely to when I joined Thomas Pocklington Trust, which was 5 years ago. So I'm really excited that Jenny's joining us this evening. So I'll let Jenny introduce herself and then we'll take it from there.
Hi everybody, thank you ever so much for the opportunity for letting me talk mainly about myself for a little while. So just a brief background, I'm currently at Standard Chartered within the Conduct, Financial Crime and Compliance Assurance team. What that means in short is that I act as one of the second lines of defence for those risks for the bank and do reviews to make sure that the bank is meeting its regulatory and our own internal standards, to make sure that we are adhering to what we need to do on a regular basis. So a lot of my role is to do with stakeholder management, walkthroughs, understanding processes, lots and lots of review of information, and understanding the different businesses within the bank.
Okay, that's brilliant. So I guess the first place to actually start is to ask what is banking like as an industry to be working in?
Well, I've really enjoyed it because I was 10 years at PwC, so I've always worked at large corporations. So that was what I was used to when I joined the bank. But what's interesting for me compared to my previous roles is that it's global. So I get to work with people from around the world and diverse individuals with completely different backgrounds, qualifications to myself. So I learn all the time, every day, and none of my days are the same because it's so varied. There's one review can be completely different to another review within the banking sector. So yes, it's the variety, the people, and the diversity.
Yeah, brilliant. And how did you get into it? Did you always know that you wanted to work in banking and finance, or?
Not at all. My dreams to start with was I used to dance. So I did that and competed when I was younger, and then I realised that I wasn't really good enough to make an income out of that. So I moved over I loved science at school, and science and maths. So I did a biochemistry degree. And I was going to go more down the scientific route. So I did a biochemistry degree and worked at St Thomas's Hospital in the endocrinology department. Wasn't for me. I didn't get to speak to anybody. I only enjoyed the analysing of the data at the end. I didn't enjoy doing all the assays. Didn't like working with all the chemicals. So I completely changed careers. So I looked at graduate schemes because I already had university fees, costs to pay, but I knew that I needed to retrain. So I joined a graduate scheme at PwC, where I learnt like the assurance audit department, but I also got trained to be a chartered accountant over the course of 3 years. And they paid for my exams, and then I worked for them to gain the experience for the hours that are required for that qualification. So I went down that route, and I felt more natural to what I wanted to be doing, and talking to people all the time.
Was that like quite an easy change to make then? Because it doesn't sound like a kind of natural, biochemistry and finance, to a layman like me, that doesn't sound like it goes hand in hand. So, was that fairly easy to demonstrate, or was it challenging?
Well, lucky for me, first of all, I went back to my university and spoke to a careers advisor, and I said what I enjoyed doing in a role, and that I wanted to talk to people, and I enjoyed the data analytical side. And he's the one who suggested 2 roles for me that could suit what I wanted. One was a patent agent, where they take scientists to learn about that aspect of the law, because it's easier to teach a scientist a particular piece of the law rather than a lawyer science. And also then he suggested working for more of an accountancy firm. But the challenge is I'm dyslexic, so being a patent agent for me didn't feel as natural. So I went down the more chartered accountancy route. Where I was restricted was I wanted to apply for a graduate scheme where I was not paying the cost, that it was incorporated into my contract with under the graduate scheme. But they took on, they weren't restricting their PwC at the time when I joined, and I believe it's still the same, is they don't just want to take on and train accountants who did accountancy at university. They want a diverse pool of people. But what was difficult was it was the exams. I had a lot of catch up to do. The first year of exams was intense. To give you a quick example, my first week after when I sat doing the training in like a college form away from the office, the guy next to me said, "You've just learned basically what I covered in the first year of uni in a week." So it was very intense, but well worth it, because it opened up. I like learning anyway, and it opened up so many opportunities for me then to take forward.
I think it's quite interesting, like when you kind of go through university, or you think that you've got a certain kind of career mapped out, and then when you get into it, you find out that it really isn't what you envisaged or what you want. And I think that can be quite daunting. Like, it happened to me as well. I graduated from uni, and I thought that I wanted to work in HR. I was, all set for it. And then I got a job working for a university, and I absolutely hated it. Like, it wasn't what I was expecting, like just wasn't for me. And it's kind of quite daunting, isn't it? Like to think, oh, I've invested like this, all this time into thinking this is what I want to do. And I actually don't. So how did you manage that side of it? Like when you kind of realized that,
first of all, I think the mindset first of all is have I just wasted that time at university? And I was like, no, hang on a minute. I did learn about the way that, for example, even with the reports I do now, is set out in a similar structure as if I'm writing a scientific report.
Yeah.
And also a lot of the disciplines and learning were transferable. But really, actually, without a degree of a certain nature, like they wanted the sciences, maths, you had to have a certain, even though it was diverse, you still had to have a certain criteria of degree. I wouldn't have been able to been accepted to a graduate scheme, that you had to have a degree. But you're right in the sense that it was before I knew what I was doing, and I weren't even sure if I could get on a graduate scheme. I felt a bit overwhelmed about what choices were they for me in my position. And for me, I think it was talking to the career advisor, thinking about what could be transferable, so it wasn't a complete waste of time. And appreciating that it's all part of me sort of learning and moving on my career path. And I'm glad I made the decision when I did. I think it would have been more difficult if I stayed where I was for a prolonged period of time and then decided to change. Yeah,
of course, So when you know, like kind of 10 years, what is it, do you say now? 10 more than 10 years later?
Oh,
it was obviously a decent move. So what would you say you enjoy the most about working in banking?
So I did some banking work when I was at PwC and enjoyed it, and then went across why one of the reasons I applied for Standard Chartered is just the absolute no day is the same. And you can be like, for example, when I was doing more strict statutory audits, you have a strict criteria which you need to review and go through. But where I'm doing reviews now, and it's looking at more of the compliance side, the risk-based approach, I get to be a little bit more creative on how I address risk and do my reviews. And the one thing that really sticks out compared to my other roles is the collaboration that we have with each other. I'm on a working group to help improve learning for the wider group. So I get to, and even though I'm relatively junior in the team, I feel like I still have a voice. So I enjoy the team spirit, the nature of the diversity of my work, and I still like it's a larger corporation as well, because there's opportunities like we just done like a city race run, and the well-being, I believe, of the employees is considered as well.
I actually done that Standard Chartered Bank run last year. It was loads of fun. So I got to meet Steve McManaman as well. So.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, it was good. So what would, if somebody's thinking about a career in banking or finance, what would be your main tips, do you think, for somebody starting a career or moving into that field?
Well, it depends, because the challenge is, like, for example, myself, there is just the breadth of what you can do. Like, there's HR roles in banks. There's when you say finance, you can work for the actual finance team, and I do more of a compliancy, conduct related second line review. So it's the breadth of jobs in the bank that the one I'm doing now, the role I'm doing now, I didn't even know existed. So I think when you say tips to going in, it's understanding about where do you see yourself fitting, or is it, and if so, it's almost like it's difficult when I kind of fell into this role, which I'm sure we'll touch upon later. But it's hard to know. When I first applied to the PwC, it was the reason why, but when I originally went to the bank, it was for a different role. So it's trying to grasp, where do you see yourself fitting? And do you have the qualifications that they're looking for the bare minimum? Because absolute minimum is if you need to be in a certain area, you probably need to have that qualification to be able to do it. And experience is almost like, I think obviously it's important, but you have to have the capabilities in the sense of certain qualifications as well. So I went indirectly into it. I went to a graduate scheme, which I think I absolutely thought was, for my situation at the time, was excellent. So I'd say look to see what opportunities they are to enter in if you don't have, because I didn't have the qualification to do what I do now. I had to do a graduate scheme to get that qualification. So if you don't have, sorry, it's a bit waffly now, but it's understanding where you want to sit and then making sure what qualifications you need, and then finding a route, if you can, to obtain those qualifications.
Yeah. It's kind of it's having a goal, isn't it? And then doing the research to enable you to get there, I guess, and knowing that you don't have to be like some maths wizard to go and work for Standard Chartered Bank. As you say, there's roles in HR, there's roles in marketing. You know, it's a very diverse in terms of staff and tasks, but also in terms of roles and responsibilities that are out there as well. So
yeah, as well as and the big, obviously not just Standard Chartered, but other banks, other large corporations, the variety of jobs in there is not as traditional as you may initially think of when you think of that industry. Yeah.
So how did you get into the role that you're doing now?
Well, I originally joined the bank based on because I did, as you know, I did the chartered accountancy, but then I funded when I was at PwC and worked in the forensic investigations. So I looked at fraud investigations. So this, we'd have clients hire us to go in and see if there was misconduct being conducted either externally or with their employees. So I changed again and went more, and I enjoyed that, so I stayed in that line and I did that for 5 years. So an opportunity come up, but it's sorry, I should just say the role was very much based wherever the client was, but I was looking for more longer term, more fixed based. And an opportunity come up at the bank where I was working at regulatory investigations. So this would be responding to regulator requests and also involved in where there's alleged like misconduct of employees as well. So it sounded perfect for the area that I enjoyed doing. But unfortunately, the role that I was working in, but I say unfortunately, it worked out for the best in the end, because the team that I was in no longer was going to exist. So my role was made redundant. So I applied. I looked to see what else I'd be interested in the bank, and luckily there was another opportunity where it's my current role. And I applied for that and was successful. So I did an internal move from one team that was going to be no more into another team. So that's how I got into my role at the moment.
That must have been quite challenging time, though, knowing that the job that you were doing was no longer going to exist, or the team was no longer going to exist. How did you kind of deal with that? Was that?
Yeah, first of all, it's very scary, because I enjoyed the job. So I didn't know at the time, when you were initially told there would be an opportunity for me, which I ended up learning even more from. So at the time, yes, it was very scary. So I just, I had to just really take a step back and think, how can I move forward or sideways to sort of continue forward? So because I'd undergone already quite a lot of change in career, I think I'd spoke to a lot of people in the bank, and we have a platform where you can see where other opportunities exist. I was lucky and did some research and just accepted that it may not be a role that I originally wanted, but then none of these roles were something I originally was planning. So I think that it was very scary, but then what happened was I joined the team, and it was originally just compliance. It didn't cover the financial crime or the conduct. But when I was on maternity leave, they incorporated those areas as well, which I have experience in. So I came back from maternity leave with a stronger role, personally to me, which I preferred, as in stronger as in a wider range of stuff I'd already covered, which was of interest to me. So very scary. And again, that we mentioned, just refocus, keep going, research, talk to people and apply. So on that of talking to people, have you kind of found that having a network of people that you can speak to and get advice from has been something which has benefited you? Like you've mentioned, going back to a careers advisor and things like that. It's, has that been quite important? Definitely. I think ever since I jumped into I didn't talk to anybody about doing a biochemistry degree. And sometimes I don't need to even hear someone else's opinion. I need to just voice and talk through what's going on in my own head. Unfortunately, my family are not in the same sort of sectors of industry to do that with. So and even my friendship group, no one does a job similar to me. So I've very much relied on careers, people I've worked with in the past. I even spoke to, like intermediaries, like agencies, to see what was available at the time, to understand and grasp more information. So yeah, anybody who would talk to me.
I think that's so important, though, isn't it? You know, like it's really important, and you know, I've mentioned it in other webinars that we've done, but kind of being able to just put yourself out there a bit and you know, ask people and get noticed to a certain extent as well. I think is really kind of valuable, and even for your kind of own confidence, you know, just getting that reassurance that you are on the right track, or somebody might give you that bit of advice that you hadn't considered before, and it really makes a big difference.
Absolutely. And what I didn't want to do is make any decisions out of panic or nerves, or when you're put in a situation of change, it can be make you maybe not think as rationally as you would do normally. So yes, having a sounding board, absolutely vital.
So looking at you know, where you're at now, do you think it's been quite important? You know, you said that you were originally doing compliance, but were really good at the more forensic side of things. Has it been beneficial for you to have that niche, do you feel?
Yeah, so interesting with the word niche, because I'm very much, even though it's those areas of like fraud, really is where I've got my more recent sort of qualifications from, because I did some more training on top of my chartered accountancy. I am very much what's considered a generalist. So when I was at PwC, I had the opportunity to work on first of all, varied industries for audit, and then varied clients for the forensic investigations. So I've always been classed as a generalist rather than a niche. But the more I move through, you kind of go more and more into one sort of area. So I'm lucky in a way that I still would consider myself a generalist. But yes, I think the further you go through your career, you kind of it gets narrower. So it's important for me. It's important for me to keep that training. Like, for example, right now, it is absolutely where I'm missing and I need to get up to speed with is technology has changed so much since I did my training. And I don't want to fall behind. I want to do like what I do. I want to remain relevant. So I'm applying to do different courses, different things and discuss it. It's even put in my objectives with my manager that these are the things I want to work towards by the end of the year, to gain that, to start really building on the technology side, because I think that's important for me. So I think it's to prevent going too niche. It's keeping that training so you're still relevant and you can still be broad enough as possible in case my role changes again.
Yeah, definitely. That kind of brings me on to my next question as well, and you know, that ability to adapt as well to your situations, to your circumstances. Like how important is that kind of been?
Very. The biggest challenge I had was becoming a mum. And I had to re-change the way I worked completely. So before, I could be quite relaxed with my hours, as in it didn't matter. I didn't have to leave dead on 5 or 5:30. If I went on a bit later, it didn't matter. But when you have a child to pick up from nursery, I had to re-change the way I worked. So I had to become more focused, even more organised. I had to be, my day would be very strict. And then I might have to do a little bit more that evening if I needed to, once the little one's in bed. So as in change, that has been for me. And in lockdown, I was just me and my son working with no nursery. So again, I had to be completely changed the way I worked again and work around him. So yeah.
have Standard Chartered been quite accommodating of those kind of different needs that you have then, kind of being a bit more flexible over the hours that you work and letting you choose? Have they been quite supportive of that?
Absolutely, because I've been regular discussions with my manager, who's also been supportive, and the bank's been supportive, because we had to just change. I think everyone has had different challenges, and working flexibly was a must to continue doing what you needed to do. So, for example, for myself, I did a lot more of maybe about 3 or 4 hours during a normal business day, but then I did a chunk of a night. Yeah. So luckily at the time I was doing some work with the US, so it was okay. But even if I wasn't with the US, they were very much they knew the necessity and will come and encouraging people to work flexibly. And
did you feel kind of all right about asking for them changes as well, or were you a bit worried at first? Or
well, I was lucky because, again, being in a larger corporation, they did send out messages to let people know, and I gave people could be able to contact their line manager, and made it very much a discussion point, and had they increased the amount of update emails going out, and they told us more through more communications through phone calls, and we had increased communications to keep us up to date on what was happening. And my manager, I'm lucky that I feel like I can reach out to her if I was struggling anyway. So yeah, I'm lucky.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, that's really encouraging though, and I think even pre-lockdown, in previous careers previous roles that I've had, I've always needed to kind of look at maybe doing certain things differently, and being able to speak to my manager about that. So, for example, when I first moved to London, I was working in TV, and that demanded like quite long hours sometimes. But I needed to, I had through access to work, I used to get a taxi to and from work, because I just didn't know my way around London at that point. I'd had about 2 weeks to move down. So I was getting the taxi to and from, and those were set at a certain time. So it'd get to like 5:30, and I'd still have probably a couple of hours work to do, but needed to get this taxi to go home. So, I had that conversation with my manager and was just like, look, if I can go home, log in, get the work done, is that okay? You don't need me to be in the office. And they were like, no, absolutely. Like, there's certain things which need to be done for certain deadlines. As long as you meet them deadlines, it doesn't really matter to us where they're done. But it took quite a lot for me to make that, to go up and ask that question of my manager at that time. So
yeah, because you don't want it to. First of all, when I was first reach out, I was like, does this look like am I? I didn't want to be treated any differently. Yeah. So I'm one of the youngest children of the team. Yeah. And it was when I first. Lucky, I've got a comfortable relationship. I could talk to her, but obviously it also needed the approach that I was doing needed to be approved by other people as well. Yeah. So I was a bit nervous, but actually they made me, once I started talking, I had no reason to be nervous, that everyone had different challenges and were having to adapt based on what their situation was. But I completely understand what you mean. It's that initial conversation, and then you kind of relax, and then actually you have no need to worry at all, everything's fine. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, this is it. So yeah, totally. So I'm kind of looking at, like your career as a whole today, and particularly, since becoming a mum, and that change in, like working patterns, and you having to be more organized and things like that. How important has it been to kind of maintain a level of resilience through that?
Oh, very. It can be, especially when, for me as well, it's been quite challenging where if you have lack of sleep, and and also maybe sometimes I feel like I want to do more, but I physically can't, because I have to stop what I'm doing and switch. but I don't want, and in resilience as well, is that I also want to try and do the best for my son as well. So you're conflicted.
Yeah.
So it's tough, and I'm still learning. I'm still trying to adapt and learn the best way to do it, because this is unlike any other challenge I've had before, where it is just changing the way I used to be, and it's gonna take time. Yeah. So I think to start with, I was being a bit harsh on myself and expected overnight to be able to juggle everything completely and be absolutely fine. So I'm just seeing this as a long-term learning curve of how am I best meeting and delivering what I need to for work. And it turns out I was actually delivering and better when I could be more flexible around my commitments with my son. So by working flexibly meant that I was more focused when I needed to be, and I was on calls when I needed to be, and I worked when I needed to be, but also making sure that when I needed to be off during the day, I could be off. So I'm still learning how to do it best, but already I can see that I don't think it's going to disadvantage compared to how I was pre being a mum.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, brilliant. So just kind of thinking about employment, like more widely, and people that might be watching here, how important do you think it is to have kind of goals and a plan to achieve them? We've touched on it a little bit earlier, but.
I've always wanted to, because really the only person I can compare myself to is myself. So I always want to be able to continue learning and better myself, as in and adapt what I need to, like the technology example I was giving. But in regards to goals, like I think it's a matter of continue to learn, but also be flexible in what you need to do as well. From me personally. Because things will be thrown at you, things won't go as planned. But if overall you continue your learning, growth, development, and then hopefully eventually you go in the right direction. But that's so mine has been a windy road. Yeah. But eventually, what I'm hoping to achieve is just, well, my goal is a long-term goal, really, rather than short-term. It's just ongoing development, keeping current, keeping up with the times, and hopefully that then I'll remain relevant and employable, really. Yeah, well, I guess I think it's really interesting what you're saying about maintaining the level of skills that you have and then developing new skills as well. I think that anybody who's currently out of work and looking to get back into work. I used to do some work in recruitment, and one of the things that you're always looking for is if people do have kind of gaps or have been in a role for a long time, what have they done to keep themselves current? What training courses have they done? How what new skills have they learned and things like that? And I think it's really important. I don't know what you think, Jenny, but to keep on top of that all the time. Absolutely. I must admit, during lockdown, I was struggling with basic work, juggling my little one. But I've had friends who are furloughed who have completely learned something new to help their career in the long term. Like one of my friends is a librarian, and she's always wanted to be like a legal secretary sort of side. So she went online to see what could she start reading and looking at to help her towards that goal. She just made available the resources that were online. I spent like the first couple of months of lockdown, like trying to learn how to code just to see if it's something that I could do, and found some free resources online and got well away with it. And to be honest, there's potential even now on some projects that I'm working in at TPT where that some HTML stuff that I've learned is coming really handy. So I think it's keeping your skills up to date is really important. So what other kind of things do you think are important for anybody that might be out of work or is looking for the next career move? Have you got any advice for them guys? Yeah, I'm afraid this would just be just on my own experience. Totally. Yeah, just for me was when I've gone between roles, it was very much just, talking to people, as you mentioned, with the training, keeping up to date, what's going on. But also I had, when I graduated, one of the scariest parts for me is when I suddenly I graduated, and then while I was applying for graduate scheme jobs, after I graduated, went to the hospital, worked in the endocrinology department, and then when I was applying for graduate jobs, I had about a year in between. So what I did was, while I was applying for graduate jobs, I worked at an insurance company, a franking machine company, and worked at different types of industries that I thought could contribute and learn something new, different to what I was doing, biochemistry. So I think even if you take on a role, oh, sorry, that's my dog, by the way, that's not me. And you'll hear my little one in a moment as well, I'm afraid. It's just come back in. The thing was, for me, even though I knew it was jobs that I weren't going to be doing long term, doing the best you can and learning as much as you can from that role, even if it's temporary, that's what was absolutely benefited me. And obviously it's going to differ for different people.
Yeah. When I left, as I was saying earlier on, when I left working in HR, I had a bit of a gap at that point, and one of my friends was working in youth work, and she was like, "Look, why don't you come down?" Like, because I was quite into sport as well, so I was pretty sporty. And she was like, "Why don't you come down and, we do this sport to education and employment with kids that have been kicked out of school." And I went down there and was given about 3 days a week, 4 days a week to it, and never even considered getting into that sort of work, previously. And was working with all these young people to, get their employment skills up and things like that. And then, I didn't really think much more of it. I'd done that for about a year, and then I moved to London to work in TV. So completely irrelevant to what I actually went on to do. But then 2-3 years later, I decided that I didn't want to work in TV anymore, and was kind of reevaluating, what I wanted to do in terms of a job and what really drove me. And I was like, well, I enjoyed doing that work with them young people, and I'm passionate about employment for blind and partially sighted people. So I kind of brought them two things together, and then always kept my eye out on roles. And then, originally the one at TPT come up, and that was about 5 years ago. And if I'd never done that voluntary work in terms of working with them young people and working with them on their employability skills, I wouldn't have got this like initial role, and I wouldn't have even known that was something that I was good at or wanted to do. So I think, even when you've got them gaps, go and take every opportunity to do some volunteering and stuff like that, because you never know, you might love it and might lead on to something that you hadn't considered before. So when you're in work, Jenny, what do you think that you need to do to succeed?
Well, that's quite that's quite a broad question.
Well, what would you say, the top tips are to succeed when you do get into the workplace?
In the workplace, I think for me, I always just try and do my best, and know, for me as well. So that's my little one. Sorry about the noise.
That's all right.
The other thing for me, do my best and know where my weaknesses are and where I might need to seek out assistance from somebody else. And also, I think it's important to build those sort of relationships within work as well, and sort of team spirit. You're better as a team than you are as an individual. Yeah. So that's what, and I'm still learning as well for myself personally. What else more do I need to do to succeed? But yeah, that's where I enjoy considering it from that angle. Yeah.
Okay, well, if you're happy, Jenny, shall we move over and see if there's any questions being put forward? If I can ask Anna to read them out.
Yeah, of course. And if there's anything that I won't know because it's broader than my role,
Yeah.
I'm happy to take it away and then I can come back.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that'd be perfect. Yeah. So, Deep, have we had any questions?
Hi guys, yes we do. So, first question: what qualifications do you require to get onto the graduate scheme?
Oh, well, the graduate scheme I joined was a PwC graduate scheme. I won't tell you the year; it will give away my age. Sorry about the
It's okay. Don't worry.
There is a little one just joined our meeting, but I needed to have certain GCSEs, A levels, and a degree. I didn't need any prior accounting experience. It was very much they were looking at my purely they were looking at my academic side, but they also wanted to know what I had done. When experience-wise, they weren't looking for experience in finance, which I thought they would be when I was being interviewed. It was more to what sort of general life experience that I had. I remember being asked about my Marks and Spencer's job, which I thoroughly enjoyed for a number of years when I was younger, and talking through just general like travel and other things like that. So I think they were trying to gather my absolute basic, as in the sense that I needed to have the core qualifications, and then looking at my sort of life general experience to date.
I think I'll come in there as well. There's so many different graduate schemes out there that look for different things. It's quite a difficult question to answer, but for most graduate schemes, you normally will need a degree. Now that can be a 2-2 or a 2-1 normally. Traditionally, it always used to be 2-1 and above, but I've seen quite a shift in that recently. But for those that don't have a degree, there is more and more we're starting to see apprenticeships come to the fore, and they're not just for young people. They're of all ages, and that's like another way to want to get some experience with an employer, but also do some training which is going to enable you with the skills to do that. And the entry levels for them are very different to what it'd be for a graduate scheme. So yeah, next question, Amity, please.
So someone's asked a follow-up question to the graduate scheme one. So are these schemes age restricted?
I know when I joined my one, it wasn't definitely not age restricted then. It was only when I was saying about my age is because I had a year at a lab and then went straight from university. But I actually was working with people who it was their second career choice. They'd moved over to do it, and they were older than myself. So from my experience, it's not age restricted, and that was quite a few years ago. And I think if I've seen anything, it is. I don't think it's even allowed.
I was going to say, it wouldn't be age restricted. So as long as you've got the qualifications, you can apply. And again, more and more employers are looking for diversity on their graduation schemes as well. So being a bit older and having different life experiences can sometimes be a benefit.
So next question. This one we had emailed in earlier in the week. So majority of working class ethnic minority do not have the relevant qualifications to go into an industry you've entered into. To broaden the gap, have you thought about some sort of apprenticeship scheme?
I'm afraid in regards to the apprenticeship schemes at the bank, I'll have to get back to you on. I only know about my own experience where I joined a graduate scheme, and that I became a chartered accountant, and by the cost of the company, because I was on their scheme, and rather than pay out myself, it was on the job training. But I'm afraid I can't answer specifically in regards to that area because I'm not familiar, but I'm happy to take it away.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, and I think Standard Chartered Bank they do seem as if they're quite keen on diversity and inclusion as well.
Definitely.
I'd be amazed if there isn't some sort of schemes or internships that do become available. The finance sector have always been, the banking sector have always been kind of at the forefront of that sort of stuff as well. So yeah.
Yeah, I know that at the moment there is specific sort of work being done to look at sort of younger population, sort of encouraging those who may not have got into that industry and investing time in those. It's not something I'm afraid I've personally been involved in, so I can find out a bit more about what we're doing there.
Yeah, that'd be great, and then we can send that out with the information that we send out in due course. So yeah, thanks for the question there.
Cool. Another one, and I think this is quite related to what you just kind of mentioned. So could the panel kind of comment on, again, apprenticeship schemes, but be on a cross section of diversity groups to ensure that that they enter on merit and competency, ability, skills?
Yeah, well, I can only comment from experience and from what I've seen on this regards apprenticeships, and you know they're still fairly new, and even myself as somebody that gives employment advice and guidance, you know, I'm still trying to get my head around them, and you know they're changing all the time. But I do hope that they you know, recruiters are looking for a diverse that they're looking for diverse talent. You know, more and more employers that I speak to, it's definitely more on their agenda than what it was 5 years ago when I started this job. And I think apprenticeships are only going to add to that, because it widens the pool. You know, not everybody's cut out to go and do a university degree, and apprenticeships fill some of that gap in. I think that, you know, I look back on my time now and I kind of think, I wish I'd been able to do an apprenticeship rather than go to uni for 4 years, because I could have done with earning some money during that time. So I do see things changing, but you know, I don't think you know, it's hard to comment on how diverse these are currently. But fingers crossed they will be quite diverse, and employers have that on their agenda. So. I don't know if you've got anything to add to that, Jenny. Or
I know what I can do is I'll just include it with the last question and take it away to see.
Yeah.
Is there anything specifically that's being considered wider than from a wider perspective?
Bro, thanks. Have you got any more questions, Amadee?
Yes, we've got quite a few.
Oh, really?
All right. So the next one is about how relevant is previous work experience to complete a career change? For example, someone who worked as a shopkeeper going into finance.
So what was the question? I didn't hear the beginning. Sorry about that.
Yeah, so basically, how relevant is previous work experience to complete a career change? So for example, you know, someone going from, say, a shopkeeper into finance.
Well, because I worked at Marks and Spencer's and a lab before I went into become a graduate scheme to be an auditor. So, and it was very relevant because there's transferable areas. Like, for example, I worked in the customer service desk at Marks and Spencer's. And after doing that, that helped me with my stakeholder management skills and chatting to people and just building up my confidence. So I'd say that any work you do, you can learn from, increase confidence. For me personally, I've absolutely used, and I was very lucky that I had the experience of having various shop jobs and things growing up, because I don't think I would have been as confident. Well, I don't think I would have been able to answer interview questions or be as confident talking to people otherwise.
We had to, one of our previous employees at TPT, I'd done some interview prep work with her, and she was going for a finance role at TPT, and she used to help her mum and dad out in a shop and do help them with the pricing and the accounts and things like that. And she used that in her interview and ended up getting, she was an intern with us, and then got a job as a finance assistant. So always look at your transferable skills and see how you can use them in a job interview or add them to your CV or an application form. And even kind of life experiences are really important, and use them. particularly when you're looking to move career, because the chances are that if you're looking at a career change, you're kind of going in at a more entry level, so the expectations aren't as high. So absolutely draw on all of the transferable skills that you can think of that are relevant to that role. So.
Sorry about that.
It's all right. It's the age of lockdown, isn't it? Like this stuff happens all the time. So. Have we got any more questions, Abdi?
Yeah, so we've got I think a couple of questions for Jenny.
Yeah.
So, broadly speaking, what do you think are the key skills required to work in the banking industry?
Oh, key skills. The challenge with this one is because there's just so many different types of jobs. So when you say banking industry, the roles there are just is a huge amount, and I think where your skills are based depends on it will just depend. So I can talk about for my role. I think being able to analyze data for me is absolutely vital, and being able to manage stakeholders, and also help manage and be part of a team. So for myself, those are the sort of skill sets that's needed for my role, but then it will change for a different role within the bank.
Cool. And this question is probably for both of you. I would like to ask for any sort of advice or tips, or even resources for someone with no sight who is trying to gain an understanding of bookkeeping principles.
What I'll say is I'll 100% go away and look into this. I don't know an answer off the top of my head. I do know, however, that there are other blind and partially sighted people that do bookkeeping and work in accountancy, and that there's accessible software. And also we've had interns working at TPT as part of our finance team that have done this kind of work. So I'm absolutely convinced that there will be stuff out there. I just don't know off the top of my head. So I'll go away and take a look at that this week, and we can send either feel free to follow up with us via email, which is employment@pocklington-trust.org.uk, and we can arrange a chat, or we'll send out some general information in the update that we do when we send out the link for the webinar. So
great. Another question for Jenny. So Jenny, you mentioned that you're dyslexic. Has this impacted your career or the choices you've made? And did you have to make any adjustments as part of your studies or in your career?
Yeah, absolutely. I was always focused towards the maths and science at school, but I actually found English and languages very difficult, and I didn't quite understand why. It was only when I was studying to be a chartered accountant that it was recommended to me to do the test, and what had worked out is one part of my brain was compensating for the other. So, for example, my reading speed is a lot slower than average, but my as a benefit of it, if anything, I've benefited it because I'll be looking at data and I might see patterns, or I look at it slightly differently than somebody who wasn't dyslexic. So I've used it into my advantage in that way, and I'm very much aware that I might need time to read something in advance, and I tend to just sort of, maybe if it's really urgent, just maybe read the exec summary or the summary and say that I need to go away and read the rest of it, and I just need a bit more time. But also I've come up with little ways of for spelling and little rhymes, and I work slightly differently to some of my colleagues as well. I just find different ways to go around those challenges I have. But also I'm very aware that I may be looking at things slightly differently to some of my colleagues, to bring that benefit as well.
Right, and we've got one last question which has come through email. So in compliance, especially at entry or government resource level, many of the tools and materials we have to work are not accessible, and it can be quite difficult to secure the support and resources one needs to make things work. how or rather would where should the lines be between what is realistic for visually impaired compliance officer and where or when do we admit defeat when it comes to trying to work equally in an unequal environment?
Well, I think my initial response to that would be not to give up. Being a compliance officer isn't something I'm massively familiar with, but I would be looking at speaking to your employer to see if there's a way to make those tools and resources accessible, and trying to find out if any other blind and partially sighted people work in compliance, and might be able to offer some advice. But yeah, certainly don't give up. I can't offer much more insight than that, just because I'm not a compliance expert, and I don't know what the tools and resources are. But by all means, again, if somebody wanted to have a chat about that, contact us and we can do that and see if we can find a solution to that. I wouldn't imagine that you know much about accessible tools and resources for compliance, Jenny.
I must admit, I don't, but I'm very happy to take that away and have a look into that, and speak to a few people to see if I can find out any more information.
Yeah, that. Is that it for the questions, Amity?
Yeah, no more questions as of yet.
Perfect. Okay, well, I'll suggest that we wrap it up there, Jenny. I'll let you get to your son. Sounds like he wants his tea.
Yeah, yes, he normally eats his dinner at 5:30, so apologies for the noise.
It's all right.
Related. He's hunting the cupboards.
I'm normally exactly the same if I'm getting me dinner late as well. So, but again, I just really want to say thank you for joining us tonight. I think it's really great to get an insight into compliance and the work, the work that you do, and also the challenges that you've faced. And, although you're not blind or partially sighted yourself, you've had challenges to overcome and made a career work for you and went through that career change. And, I think that insight has been really valuable, and I've learned a lot from tonight. So thank you.
And thank you for the opportunity. I've not done anything like this before, so it's been an interesting experience. I've enjoyed it, so thank you.
No problems. Okay, guys, that's it for this evening. We have got some more in conversations with coming up. Details will be getting sent out in due course. The next two are with blind and partially sighted people that are working in the civil service. So we're really looking forward to them. So keep your eyes out. Feel free to drop us an email if you want to sign up for the mailing list. If you have any questions about tonight, again, drop us an email and we'll follow up with the resources and information we've said that we will. Okay, till next time, guys. Thank you very much, and bye-bye.